The morning sun cast long shadows across the bustling marketplace as Elena Martinez carefully navigated through the crowd, her white cane tapping rhythmically against the cobblestones. She had memorized every vendor's location, every uneven stone, every potential obstacle in this familiar territory. What she hadn't anticipated was her husband's betrayal waiting for her at the flower stall. "I can't do this anymore, Elena." Marcus's voice cut through the morning chatter like a blade. "I married you when you could see. This isn't what I signed up for." His words carried the weight of 3 years of marriage and 2 years since the accident that had stolen her sight. Elena's fingers tightened around her cane, her heart racing as she processed his words. "Marcus, we can work through this. The doctor said there might be experimental treatments." "I've met someone else," he interrupted, his voice growing distant. "Someone who can give me the life I want. I'm leaving, Elena. Don't try to find me." The sound of his retreating footsteps mixed with the market's chaos, leaving Elena standing alone among strangers, abandoned like an unwanted piece of merchandise. The flower vendor, Mrs. Guadalupe, had witnessed the entire exchange. Her weathered hands gently touched Elena's shoulder. "Mija, you sit here. Let me get you some water." But Elena couldn't move. The weight of her new reality pressed down on her shoulders like a physical force. She was alone, truly alone, in a world she could no longer see. As the day progressed, Elena remained at the flower stall, unsure of where to go or what to do. Her apartment was in Marcus's name. Her job at the local library had been lost months ago when budget cuts eliminated her position, and her savings were nearly depleted from medical bills. The scent of roses and carnations surrounded her as she contemplated her limited options. Other vendors began to take notice of the well-dressed woman who sat motionless among the flowers. Some whispered about the scene they'd witnessed, others offered small kindnesses, a cup of coffee, an empanada, gentle words of encouragement. Elena accepted their charity with grace, though inside, she felt her dignity cracking like old paint. As evening approached, the marketplace began to empty. Elena knew she couldn't stay there forever, but the thought of navigating her way to a women's shelter in an unfamiliar part of the city felt overwhelming. She had been dependent on Marcus for transportation, for guidance, for so much more than she had realized. Now, sitting among the wilting flowers as vendors packed up their stalls, Elena faced the terrifying prospect of rebuilding her entire life from scratch, armed with nothing but her determination and the kindness of strangers. The marketplace had grown quiet as the last vendors secured their stalls for the night. Elena remained seated on the small wooden stool Mrs. Guadalupe had provided, her mind racing through impossible scenarios. The elderly flower vendor had offered to let her sleep in the stall, but Elena knew she couldn't impose on such kindness indefinitely. "Excuse me, are you all right?" A deep, gentle voice interrupted her thoughts. Elena turned toward the sound, her trained ear picking up subtle details, expensive shoes on cobblestone, the rustle of high-quality fabric, a cologne that spoke of sophistication rather than teenage bravado. "I'm fine, thank you," Elena replied automatically, though her voice betrayed her exhaustion. She had perfected the art of deflecting concern over the past 2 years, but tonight her defenses felt paper-thin. "I don't mean to intrude, but I've been watching from across the square. You've been here since morning." The man's voice carried genuine concern, not the pity she had grown to recognize and despise. "I'm Alexander Reeves." Elena's breath caught. Everyone in the city knew that name. Alexander Reeves, son of President William Reeves, heir to both political legacy and a business empire worth billions. What could such a man want with someone like her? "Elena Martinez," she replied cautiously, unsure of protocol when meeting someone of his stature. "I apologize if I'm trespassing. I was just gathering my thoughts." Alexander moved closer, and Elena could sense him studying her with intelligent eyes. "Mrs. Guadalupe mentioned you might need assistance. She's worried about you." There was something in his tone that made Elena believe he genuinely cared about her welfare, not just performing a political photo opportunity. "I don't need charity," Elena said, lifting her chin with stubborn pride. "I just need a moment to figure out my next move." Even as she spoke, she knew how hollow her bravado sounded. She had nowhere to go, no money for a hotel, and no friends close enough to call for help. Alexander was quiet for a moment. What if I told you it wasn't charity? What if I told you I could use your help? Elena frowned, confusion replacing her defensive posture. I don't understand. I'm opening a foundation for the visually impaired next month. I need someone with real experience, someone who understands the challenges firsthand. The pay is substantial, and housing is included. Alexander's offer hung in the air between them like a lifeline. Elena's mind reeled. It sounded too good to be true, the kind of miraculous intervention that happened in fairy tales, not real life. Why would you offer this to a stranger? You don't even know me. I know enough, Alexander replied. I know you've been sitting here for 12 hours with dignity intact despite whatever brought you to this point. I know you thanked every person who offered you help, even when you were clearly struggling. And I know you just refused charity from someone who could easily provide it because your pride matters to you. His assessment was uncomfortably accurate. Elena felt tears threaten for the first time that day. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Alexander urged gently. Let me help you help others. The Reeves Foundation headquarters occupied an entire floor of a gleaming downtown skyscraper, but Alexander had led Elena to a smaller, more intimate office space on the building's 20th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, though Elena could only appreciate the warmth of sunlight streaming across her face as Alexander described her surroundings. The foundation focuses on 3 main areas, Alexander explained as he guided her through the space. Technology development, job placement, and independent living skills. I want you to head the independent living division. His confidence in her abilities was both flattering and terrifying. Elena ran her fingers along the smooth surface of what would be her desk. I appreciate the opportunity, Alexander, but I should be honest. I'm still learning independence myself. 2 years ago, I lost my sight in a car accident. Before that, I was completely dependent on visual cues for everything. That's exactly why you're perfect for this position, Alexander replied without hesitation. You remember what it's like to see the world differently, and you're actively navigating the challenges our clients face. Theoretical knowledge is valuable, but lived experience is irreplaceable. Over the next few hours, Alexander introduced Elena to the foundation staff. She met Dr. Sarah Chen, the technology director who was developing revolutionary navigation apps, Marcus Williams, the job placement coordinator who had successfully placed over 200 visually impaired individuals in meaningful employment, and Jennifer Torres, Alexander's assistant, whose warm efficiency immediately put Elena at ease. Your apartment is 3 blocks from here, Jennifer explained as she walked Elena through her employment package. It's fully equipped with the latest assistive technology, and there's a wonderful guide dog training facility next door if you're interested in eventually getting a companion. Elena felt overwhelmed by the thoroughness of Alexander's planning. This is incredibly generous. How long have you been working on this foundation? 3 years, Alexander answered. Since my younger sister lost her sight in a skiing accident. The pain in his voice was unmistakable, and Elena understood immediately that this wasn't just business for him. It was deeply personal. I'm sorry, Elena said softly. Is she? She's thriving, Alexander replied, his voice brightening. She's a Paralympic athlete now, competing in swimming. But those first 2 years were hell for our entire family. We had resources, connections, the best medical care money could buy, and it was still incredibly difficult. I kept thinking about families without those advantages. Elena nodded, understanding flooding through her. That's why you were at the market yesterday. You weren't just passing through. I volunteer at a community center 2 blocks away, Alexander admitted. I teach financial literacy classes on weekends. Mrs. Guadalupe is my landlady's sister. She called me when she was worried about you. The pieces began falling into place. This wasn't a chance encounter or a billionaire's whim. Alexander had built a network within the community, had seen a need, and had acted on it. Elena felt her last reservations melting away. When do I start? She asked, surprising herself with her decisiveness. How about Monday? Alexander suggested. That gives you the weekend to settle into your apartment and get familiar with the neighborhood. Elena smiled for the first time in days. Monday it is. Elena's first week at the foundation challenged every assumption she had made about her capabilities. Her office became a laboratory of innovation as she worked with Dr. Chun to test new assistive technologies, collaborated with Marcus Williams to understand employment barriers, and most importantly, began meeting with the foundation's clients. Elena, I'd like you to meet Patricia Gonzalez, Jennifer announced on Thursday morning. She lost her sight 6 months ago due to diabetes complications. She's struggling with basic mobility and has been resistant to using assistive devices. Patricia's handshake was tentative, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know why I'm here. I'm never going to be independent again. Elena recognized the despair immediately. It was the same voice that had echoed in her own mind for months after her accident. Patricia, can I share something with you? 6 months after I lost my sight, I spent an entire day crying because I couldn't find my coffee mug in my own kitchen. What did you do? Patricia asked, curiosity replacing some of the defeat in her voice. I reorganized everything, Elena laughed. I threw out half my dishes, bought new ones that felt completely different from each other, and created a system that worked for my hands instead of my eyes. It took me 3 weeks to perfect it, but now I can make coffee faster than my sighted friends. Over the next 2 hours, Elena guided Patricia through basic orientation techniques, showing her how to use consistent organizational systems and how to trust her other senses. By the end of their session, Patricia was navigating Elena's office independently and had laughed at least a dozen times. You make it seem possible, Patricia said as she prepared to leave. Like maybe I'm not broken after all. Elena felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun streaming through her windows. You are never broken, Patricia. You're just learning a new way to be whole. That evening, Alexander stopped by Elena's office as she was finishing her notes on the day's sessions. Jennifer tells me you had a breakthrough with Patricia Gonzalez. She had the breakthrough, Elena corrected. I just helped her see what was already there. She paused, realizing her choice of words. Sorry, poor phrasing. Don't apologize for language, Alexander said, settling into the chair across from her desk. My sister taught me that sight metaphors aren't offensive when they're used naturally. She still says things like, see you later and look at that. Elena relaxed, grateful for his understanding. How is she doing? Your sister? She's competing in trials for the World Championships next month, Alexander replied with obvious pride. But more importantly, she's happy. It took time, and it wasn't easy, but she found her way to a life that fulfills her. Like you're doing here, Elena observed. This foundation isn't just about helping others, it's about healing your family's experience too. Alexander was quiet for a moment. You're very perceptive. Yes, I suppose it is. Watching someone you love struggle with something you can't fix, it changes you, makes you want to build solutions. Elena understood that impulse intimately. Her own journey through blindness had been solitary and frightening, but it had also taught her resilience she never knew she possessed. Now, helping others navigate similar challenges, she was discovering purpose in her pain. Thank you, she said softly, for seeing potential in me when I couldn't see it myself. Thank you, Alexander replied, for proving that my instincts were right. 3 weeks into Elena's tenure at the foundation, her carefully constructed new life faced its first major disruption. She was in her office, reviewing applications for the foundation's next independent living workshop, when Jennifer's voice came through the intercom with unusual tension. Elena, there's someone here to see you. He says he's your husband. Elena's blood turned to ice. Marcus hadn't contacted her since abandoning her at the market, and she had begun to hope he never would. Please ask him to wait in the lobby. I'll be down in a few minutes. Her hands trembled slightly as she gathered her purse and cane. She had dreaded this moment, knowing that eventually Marcus would realize what he had given up. The foundation job came with a substantial salary, her apartment was in one of the city's most desirable neighborhoods, and her association with the Reeves family had elevated her social status considerably. Marcus had always been attracted to success, even when he was simultaneously intimidated by it. The elevator ride to the lobby felt interminable. Elena had grown confident navigating the building, but today every familiar landmark felt foreign under the weight of her anxiety. When the elevator doors opened, she immediately caught Marcus's cologne. Too strong, too obvious, exactly as she remembered. "Elena, you look—" Marcus paused, and she could imagine him taking in her professional attire, her confident posture, the designer handbag Jennifer had helped her select. "You look wonderful. What do you want, Marcus?" Elena kept her voice level, professional. She had learned not to waste energy on people who had already proven their character. "I made a mistake," Marcus said, moving closer. Elena stepped back instinctively. "I was scared, overwhelmed. I thought I was helping both of us by ending things, but I see now that I was wrong." Elena almost laughed at the transparency of his motivations. "You're here because you heard about my job." "I'm here because I miss my wife," Marcus insisted, though his tone suggested he was trying to convince himself as much as her. "We can work through this, Elena. I've grown, learned from my mistakes." "Your mistake wasn't leaving me," Elena replied quietly. "Your mistake was thinking I needed you to be complete." The truth of her words surprised even her. A month ago, she would have begged him to come back. Today, the idea of returning to their marriage felt like voluntarily entering a prison. "Elena?" Alexander's voice interrupted their conversation. She turned toward the sound, relief flooding through her at his presence. "I was looking for you. We have the budget meeting with the board in 10 minutes. Marcus's hostility was immediate and palpable. "And you are?" "Alexander Reeves," came the calm reply. Elena could imagine the two men sizing each other up, Marcus with his desperate ambition, Alexander with his quiet authority. "The president's son," Marcus said, recognition dawning in his voice. "Elena, what exactly is your relationship with Mr. Reeves?" "Professional," Elena answered firmly, though she realized the word didn't fully capture the complexity of her feelings toward Alexander. Over the past month, he had become her mentor, her advocate, and increasingly, her friend. "Alexander, this is Marcus Rodriguez, my soon-to-be ex-husband." The word ex-husband hung in the air like a declaration of independence. Elena had never said it out loud before, but hearing herself voice it felt liberating. "I see," Alexander replied diplomatically. "Elena, should we postpone the meeting?" "No," Elena said, turning back toward Marcus. "We're done here. Please don't contact me again unless it's through lawyers regarding our divorce." As she walked away with Alexander, Elena felt the last chains of her previous life falling away. She was no longer the abandoned wife, the victim, the woman who needed rescuing. She was Elena Martinez, director of independent living, builder of other people's dreams, architect of her own future. The foundation's first major fundraising gala was scheduled for a Saturday evening in November, and Elena found herself at the center of the planning storm. Her independent living program had already helped over 50 clients in just 2 months, making her the foundation's most compelling success story. Alexander insisted she should be the keynote speaker, a prospect that both thrilled and terrified her. "I've never spoken to more than 12 people at once," Elena confessed to Alexander during one of their weekly planning meetings. They had fallen into a comfortable routine of working dinners in his office, where the city lights created a warm backdrop for their increasingly personal conversations. "You speak to people's hearts every day," Alexander replied, reviewing the guest list on his tablet. "Patricia Gonzalez called yesterday to tell me she's started college classes. James Morrison landed that accounting job he wanted. Maria Santos is moving into her own apartment next week. You're changing lives, Elena." The gala guests need to hear these stories. Elena appreciated his confidence, but she worried about representing not just herself, but Alexander's vision for the foundation. "What if I say the wrong thing? What if I'm not polished enough for your donors?" Alexander set down his tablet and moved to the chair beside her. "Elena, look at me." She turned toward his voice, and she could feel the intensity of his gaze. "You are extraordinary exactly as you are. Your authenticity is what makes you so effective." Don't change that for anyone, including me. The warmth in his voice made Elena's heart skip. Over the past weeks, she had begun to recognize that her feelings for Alexander extended far beyond gratitude or professional respect. He had seen her at her lowest point and had offered not just charity, but genuine partnership. He consulted her on major foundation decisions, sought her input on his other business ventures, and had begun sharing personal stories about his family, his dreams, his fears about living up to his father's legacy. There's something else, Alexander continued, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone. I'd like to ask you to be my date for the gala. Not just as colleagues, but as... He paused, seeming to search for words. As whatever we're becoming. Elena felt her breath catch. She had sensed the growing attraction between them, but hearing Alexander voice it made it real in a way that was both exhilarating and frightening. Alexander, I'm still married, technically. The divorce won't be final for several months. I know, he replied gently. I'm not asking you to make any decisions about the future. I'm just asking you to be honest about the present. These feelings between us, they're real, aren't they? Elena nodded, unable to deny what had become increasingly obvious to both of them. They're real, but they're also complicated. I work for you. Your family is political royalty. I'm a divorced woman with no social standing. The press would have a field day. Let me worry about the press, Alexander said, reaching for her hand. And you don't work for me. You work with me. There's a difference. As for social standing, you've accomplished more in 2 months than most people do in years. You're building something meaningful, helping people transform their lives. That's the only standing that matters to me. Elena felt herself weakening under the sincerity of his words. She had spent so many years feeling invisible, first as the wife of an increasingly distant husband, then as a disabled woman whom society often overlooked. With Alexander, she felt seen in ways she had never experienced, valued for her mind, her compassion, her strength. Okay, she said finally. Yes, I'll be your date. But I reserve the right to panic about the speech until the very last minute. Alexander laughed, lifting her hand to his lips. Panic permitted. But promise me you'll remember. You belong in that room just as much as anyone else. More than most, actually. As Elena felt the gentle pressure of his kiss against her knuckles, she realized that for the first time in her adult life, she truly believed she deserved happiness. Not happiness that came at someone else's expense, not happiness that required her to diminish herself, but the kind of joy that emerged from being fully known and completely accepted. The gala was still 2 weeks away, but Elena already felt like she had won something precious. The Metropolitan Hotel's grand ballroom hummed with the conversations of 400 of the city's most influential citizens. Elena stood at Alexander's side near the entrance, greeting guests and accepting congratulations on the foundation's rapid success. Her navy blue silk dress, selected with Jennifer's help, made her feel elegant and confident, while Alexander's steady presence beside her provided an anchor in the swirl of social obligations. Elena, I'd like you to meet Senator Patricia Hawkins, Alexander said, guiding a distinguished woman toward them. Senator, this is Elena Martinez, our Director of Independent Living and tonight's keynote speaker. Ms. Martinez, I've heard remarkable things about your work, the senator said warmly. My Chief of Staff's daughter was born with congenital blindness, and she's been following your program's development with great interest. Elena felt the familiar flutter of pride mixed with responsibility. Thank you, Senator. I'd be happy to connect with your Chief of Staff about resources for his daughter. One of our goals is creating networks of support that extend beyond formal programming. As the evening progressed, Elena found herself engaged in meaningful conversations with philanthropists, business leaders, and advocacy groups. Her initial nervousness gave way to genuine enthusiasm as she shared stories about her clients' achievements and the Foundation's innovative approaches to independence training. You're a natural at this, Alexander murmured during a brief lull between introductions. I think you've charmed half the room already. They're interested in the work, not me, Elena replied, though she was secretly pleased by his observation. 6 months ago, she had been hiding in her apartment, afraid to navigate the world alone. Tonight, she was commanding the attention of some of the most powerful people in the state. The formal program began with Alexander's welcome address, in which he spoke eloquently about the Foundation's mission and his personal commitment to disability advocacy. When he introduced Elena, she felt a momentary surge of panic before his words grounded her. Elena Martinez embodies everything our foundation stands for: resilience, innovation, and the absolute refusal to let circumstances define limitations. Elena made her way to the podium with careful confidence, her prepared remarks forgotten as she looked out at the expectant faces. Instead, she spoke from her heart about her journey from abandoned wife to successful advocate, about the clients who had taught her that strength came in many forms, and about the Foundation's vision for a world where disability was seen as difference, not deficit. 6 months ago, I thought my life was over, Elena concluded, her voice carrying clearly through the silent ballroom. Today, I know it was just beginning. That's the gift we offer at the Reeves Foundation. Not charity, not pity, but the tools and support needed to write new chapters in our own stories. The standing ovation that followed seemed to last forever. Elena felt tears of gratitude and accomplishment on her cheeks as Alexander joined her at the podium, his pride in her achievement evident to everyone in the room. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Elena found herself surrounded by business cards, invitations, and requests for follow-up meetings. The foundation had raised over $2 million, but more importantly, they had built awareness and support for their mission that would extend far beyond the gala's success. "Ready to go home?" Alexander asked as the last guest departed and the hotel staff began clearing tables. Elena nodded, exhaustion and exhilaration warring in her chest. "I can't believe we pulled this off." "You pulled this off," Alexander corrected, helping her gather her belongings. "This was your night, Elena. You earned every moment of it." As they waited for Alexander's car in the hotel's circular drive, Elena reflected on the evening's success. She had faced her fears, represented her work with dignity, and proven to herself that she belonged in any room she chose to enter. More than that, she had done it all while being completely authentic. No masks, no pretense, just Elena Martinez as she truly was. "Alexander," she said softly, "thank you for believing in me before I believed in myself." "Thank you," he replied, "for proving that my faith was justified." The week following the gala brought unexpected challenges that tested both Elena's newfound confidence and her relationship with Alexander. A prominent business magazine had run a feature story about the foundation's success, but the article focused heavily on Elena's personal transformation and her connection to Alexander, complete with photos from the gala that made their relationship appear more romantic than professional. From abandoned wife to billionaire's belle, Elena read aloud from the article Jennifer had reluctantly shared with her. "They make it sound like I'm some kind of Cinderella story, like everything I've accomplished is because Alexander rescued me." "The headline is sensational garbage," Alexander said firmly from across her office. "But the article itself mentions your professional achievements, your clients' success stories, the program's innovation. Don't let the packaging diminish the substance." Elena appreciated his support, but she could hear the frustration in his voice. The article had also questioned whether nepotism played a role in her rapid promotion, suggesting that her romantic relationship with Alexander might have influenced her professional advancement. For Elena, the implication struck at the heart of her deepest insecurities. "What if they're right?" Elena asked quietly. "What if I only got this job because you felt sorry for me? What if I'm not actually qualified?" "Stop," Alexander said, his voice sharp with authority. "Elena, you've helped over 70 clients achieve independent living goals in 3 months. Our success rate is 30% higher than similar programs nationwide. You've developed innovative training protocols that other organizations are requesting to study. Those results have nothing to do with pity or romance. They're about your expertise and dedication." Before Elena could respond, Jennifer knocked on her door. "Elena, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a call from Channel 7 News. They want to interview you about the magazine article." Elena felt her stomach drop. Television interviews were terrifying enough without having to defend her professional integrity. Can we decline? Actually, Alexander interjected, I think you should do it. Let them see the real Elena Martinez, the professional, the advocate, the expert. Show them that you're not anyone's Belle. You're the director of independent living who happens to be dating the foundation's founder. The interview, scheduled for the following afternoon, consumed Elena's thoughts for the next 24 hours. She spent the evening preparing with Jennifer, practicing answers to potential questions about her qualifications, her relationship with Alexander, and her future goals. Alexander offered to appear with her, but Elena declined, knowing she needed to establish her professional identity independently. The studio interview went better than Elena had dared to hope. The reporter, Sarah Chen, approached the conversation with genuine curiosity rather than sensational intent. Elena spoke confidently about her work, shared specific examples of client successes, and addressed the relationship questions with honesty and dignity. Mr. Reeves and I developed a professional relationship first, Elena explained to the camera. My feelings for him grew from respect for his vision and appreciation for his character. But my qualifications for this position come from my education, my experience, and my results. I'd invite anyone who questions that to review our program's outcomes and our clients' testimonials. When the interview aired that evening, Elena watched it with Alexander and Jennifer in her apartment. The segment portrayed her as competent, articulate, and passionate about her work. More importantly, it let her authentic voice cut through the sensational narrative that had threatened to overshadow her achievements. You are perfect, Alexander said as the segment concluded. Professional, confident, completely yourself. Elena felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had faced public scrutiny and emerged with her integrity intact. More importantly, she had done it on her own terms, without hiding behind Alexander's influence or apologizing for their relationship. I'm learning that I can't control what people say about me, Elena reflected. But I can control how I respond to it. That, Alexander replied, pulling her close, is exactly the kind of wisdom that makes you extraordinary at your job, and the kind of strength that makes me fall more in love with you every day. Elena's heart skipped at his words. It was the first time either of them had used the word love, and hearing it felt like stepping across an invisible threshold into something deeper and more permanent than either had dared to acknowledge. I love you too, Elena whispered, finally ready to name the feelings that had been growing stronger every day. Spring brought new developments that would reshape both Elena's professional trajectory and her personal happiness. The foundation's success had attracted national attention, leading to an invitation from the Department of Health and Human Services to consult on federal disability policy. Elena found herself preparing to testify before a congressional subcommittee, a responsibility that would have seemed impossible just 6 months earlier. I keep thinking about that day at the market, Elena confided to Alexander as they walked through the park near her apartment on a Sunday afternoon. 6 months ago, I couldn't imagine a future beyond the next hour. Now I'm being asked to help shape policy that could affect millions of people. That day at the market brought us together, Alexander replied, squeezing her hand. Sometimes I think it was the luckiest day of my life, even though I know it was one of the worst of yours. Elena considered his words as they settled on their favorite bench overlooking the city. She had grown to love these quiet Sunday walks, when they could simply be Alexander and Elena rather than the foundation president and the disability advocate. I don't think of it as the worst day anymore. It was the day my real life began. Their peaceful afternoon was interrupted by Alexander's phone buzzing with an urgent message. Elena could sense his tension as he read whatever had appeared on his screen. What is it? She asked, concerned by his sudden stillness. It's my father, Alexander replied carefully. He wants to meet you. Officially. Elena felt her stomach flutter. President William Reeves was one of the most powerful men in the world, and while Alexander had mentioned her in family conversations, she had never expected a formal introduction. Is this about the congressional testimony? Does he disapprove of my involvement? On the contrary, Alexander said, relief evident in his voice as he continued reading. He's impressed by your work and wants to discuss expanding federal support for independent living programs. But Elena... He paused, and she could hear the shift in his tone. He also wants to meet the woman his son is planning to marry. Elena's breath caught. Planning to marry? Alexander turned to face her fully, his voice becoming tender and uncertain. I know we haven't talked about it officially. I know your divorce isn't final yet, and I know this whole situation is complicated. But Elena, I can't imagine a future without you in it. These past months have shown me what partnership really means, what love really looks like. Elena felt tears gathering in her eyes. The scared, abandoned woman from the market seemed like a different person entirely. In her place sat a successful professional, a respected advocate, and most importantly, a woman who knew her own worth and could choose her own happiness. Are you asking me to marry you? Elena asked softly. I'm asking if you'd be open to the possibility, Alexander replied. When you're ready, when the time is right, when you're sure that this is what you want and not just gratitude or convenience. Elena considered all the ways her life had changed, all the growth and healing that had brought her to this moment. Her love for Alexander had grown from gratitude into genuine partnership, from admiration into deep affection, from professional respect into personal devotion. She could envision a future with him that included shared dreams, mutual support, and the kind of love that made both partners stronger. Yes, Elena said simply. Yes to the possibility, yes to meeting your father, and yes to whatever comes next in this incredible life we're building together. Alexander's joy was audible in his laughter as he pulled her close. I love your courage, Elena Martinez. I love how you've turned every challenge into an opportunity, every setback into a comeback. I love your vision, Elena replied, settling into his embrace. I love how you see potential where others see problems, how you build solutions instead of just identifying issues. As they sat together watching the sun set over the city, Elena marveled at the unpredictable nature of life. 6 months ago, she had been abandoned and hopeless. Today, she was preparing to meet the President of the United States as his son's chosen partner, planning to testify before Congress about policies that could improve millions of lives, and contemplating a future filled with more possibilities than she had ever dared to imagine. The scared woman at the market had become the confident advocate on the park bench, but the journey between those two versions of herself had been worth every difficult step. 1 year after Elena's abandonment at the flower market, she stood in the rose garden of the White House, surrounded by family, friends, and colleagues who had become her chosen community. Her simple but elegant wedding dress moved gently in the spring breeze as she prepared to marry the man who had seen her potential when she couldn't see it herself. President Reeves had not only approved of his son's choice but had insisted on hosting the wedding at the White House, calling Elena the daughter I always hoped Alexander would bring home. The ceremony was small by political standards but grand by Elena's previous expectations, 50 guests who represented the life she had built rather than the one she had lost. Mrs. Guadalupe sat in the front row, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks as she watched the woman she had comforted at the flower stall prepare to become part of America's most prominent family. Patricia Gonzalez, now a college sophomore and volunteer mentor for new foundation clients, served as one of Elena's bridesmaids. Dr. Sarah Chen had flown in from Geneva, where she was presenting Elena's independent living protocols to the World Health Organization. You ready for this? Alexander whispered as they prepared to exchange vows beneath an arch of white roses. I've been ready since that day in your office when you told me I was extraordinary exactly as I was, Elena replied, her voice clear and confident. The ceremony was officiated by Federal Judge Maria Santos, whom Elena had helped.